the president who allowed Khashoggi to be cut in pieces without any repercussions whatsoever is now allowing the Christians and the Kurds to be massacred by the Turks. And I believe, and I want to say this with great solemnity, the President of the United States is in danger of losing the mandate of heaven.
Wow. Well, white evangelical Christians, including televangelist Pat Robertson, have long been devout members of the MAGA coalition, remaining absolutely faithful to Trump, even through his Russiagate scandal, more than a dozen sexual harassment and assault allegations, and his policy of separating largely Christian refugee mothers and fathers from their children at the border. But surprisingly this week, some dared speak out against Trump's decision to pull back U.S. forces from northern Syria, allowing Turkey to attack Kurdish forces there. Right-wing Christian leaders have spoken out against the Turkish operation, arguing that Kurds are key protectors of the region's Christian minority. Even uber-Trump ally Franklin Graham raised his voice. Well, okay, he made a tweet that read, quote, "Pray for the Christians who the Kurds have been protecting. They could be annihilated." Joining me now is Reverend Jim Wallis, founder of Sojourners and author of Christ in Crisis. I have your book, carrying it around with me because I'm really looking forward to reading it, sir. And you wrote a piece in the Chicago Sun-Times this Thursday in which you said, Trump versus Jesus, Christians cannot follow both. Oh, I'm sorry, you were quoted in this book. Sorry, you were quoted in it. Apologies for making you the author of it, but you were quoted in it. And you were quoted as saying, there is a conflict between the politics of Jesus and the politics of Trump. At some point, Christians have to ask themselves, are the teachings of Christ going to be followed or not? Do you see in this very small uprising among some right-wing evangelical Christian leaders an opening where people might decide that they cannot simply follow Trump off the ledge?
It's nice to see you, Joy.
Thanks.
Great question. I think there should have been an uprising long before this. The question of why these white evangelicals are supporting Trump over and over, no matter what he says and does, is the big question. And we should linger on that for a moment. It's being asked around the world. And they don't have to answer that question from me or even from you, but they've got to answer some Jesus questions. Some questions Jesus asked or was prompted to ask. And so how do we get to those Jesus questions? I think that's going to be the big issue here. We need a new conversation about Jesus. That's why I did this book on the Jesus questions. Mm-hmm. So, you know, racial bigotry is a deal breaker for the gospel. I wish I would have heard these people saying that before. It's a deal breaker for the gospel. So this is maybe an irreverent or a controversial word, but I have to say, we have to say that white nationalism is not just racist, it's anti-Christ. Dehumanizing immigrants isn't just a lack of compassion, it's really anti-Christ. I know it's a strong word, but demeaning women, sexual violence and harassment isn't just sexist, it's anti-Christ. So this is a following Jesus question more than just a foreign policy or political question.
And to your very point, if you look at the polling about the ways that white evangelical Christians feel about Donald Trump, his approval rating, even today, and this is an October 3 through 8 poll, is at 67% among white evangelical Christians. Just 27% disapprove and 6% are somehow unsure. Yeah. If you then go to the NPR PBS Marist poll, and this was October same poll, will evangelical Christians vote for Donald Trump for re-election? 62% say yes, the same percentage. 62% say yes, 27%, the same percent say no, 12% are unsure. And then if we go to the question of whether or not people believe the country, the U.S., is going in the right direction, the wrong correct direction, half, 50% of white evangelical Christians say yes, it's going in the right direction. Now 40% say it's not going in the right direction, not clear how they connect that to Trump. So why do you suppose that just on this, as you said, Nothing about the sexual abuse allegations moved them. Nothing about separating Christian families at the border. Nothing about caging children, many of whom are Christian, coming from Central America. None of that moved them. But now you have Tony Perkins, a total Trump ally, coming out this week and saying, I do not have a high level of confidence. In fact, I have no confidence that Turkey will preserve true religious freedom to protect those religious minorities. Why suddenly on the protection of religious minorities and the risk that Turkey poses to them, why are they suddenly turning?
Well, you know, that's the right question. Why didn't they turn before when 1 Corinthians says that when one member of the body of Christ suffers, we all should suffer. So when black Christian parents are afraid for their kids going out to school in the morning, or immigrant families don't know if they'll be together at night, why wasn't that an uprising? It makes me feel like the operative word in white evangelical is sadly not evangelical, but white. And so I have to push my brothers and sisters who are white evangelicals to embrace the teachings of Jesus beyond the boundaries of their very homogeneous church cultures. That's the issue here. Will we follow Jesus? And the politics of Jesus are really adverse to the politics of Trump. And following those politics of Jesus will cause increasingly defections. So maybe this foreign policy crisis, or what Trump has done again, will awaken some of these people. I think it might. I think if they listen to their black and brown evangelical brothers and sisters, if they listen to what people are saying now around the world, if they really listen to what Jesus said about who is my neighbor, what is the truth? These are fundamental Jesus questions that we all have to answer, not just white evangelicals.
And very quick, we are out of time, but I just very briefly want to ask you, do you think that the neighbors question is part of it? These are Christians who may be non-white, but they're not here. They're not in America.
Joy, I think the most important question that got asked of Jesus by a lawyer, I think it was a Washington lawyer actually, said, who is my neighbor?
Yeah.
And Jesus responds with, your neighbor is the one who's most different than you. The Good Samaritan text, reread it. I mean, this is what, your neighbor is the one who's different than you, outside your path.
Yeah.
Trump has targeted those that Jesus calls our neighbors, and we have to find our neighbor again. That's back to Jesus, and that's deeper than an election.
Reverend Jim Wallis, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you so much, and congratulations on the book. Thank you. Really appreciate your time.
Great to be here with you, Joy.
Thank you. And coming up.